In my last lecture, I discussed how to define concepts and measure variables in social research. Both are critical to achieving measurement validity. Now, in addition to measurement validity, there are two other types of validity that we want to make sure we achieve in social research. One is called generalizability. The other is called causal validity. Generalizability refers to the extent to which we can generalize our findings to a larger population. Even if we can't study everyone in that population, we want to make sure that the people we do study represent that population accurately, so that whatever we find from that smaller group of people, we know holds for the larger population as well. In this case, we have to know something about sampling. Causal validity refers to the extent to which we can pinpoint a cause in the relationships that we're looking at in research. In this case, we have to know the rules of causation. In this lecture, I'm going to discuss both sampling and causation, which will help round out our discussion of good research design. Let's begin with sampling. What in the heck is sampling? A sample is a subset of a population that we want to learn about. So if we want to learn about racial tension on college campuses, our population is all existing colleges. Now, it's not feasible to study all colleges and universities in the United States. We can only study a smaller group of those colleges or a sample of colleges. But we want to make sure that the colleges that we do study are representative of the overall population. Now, you can sample anything. You can sample people, households, schools, but whatever you sample, you want to start with a list of everything that's in that population. This is called our sampling frame. In our hypothetical case, you'd want to get a list of all colleges and universities in the United States. Now, these kinds of lists aren't always available, and this is where sampling can get tricky. For example, let's say you want to do a study of U.S. immigrants. There's no definitive list of all immigrants in the United States. But where possible, we want to start with a list, and the list is important because it's going to allow us to systematically select members from that list for our sample. And the more systematic we are in selecting members from that for our sample, the more representative our sample is going to be. Now, you don't always have to sample. If you've got the time and the money, you can conduct what we call a census, which is a study of the whole population, not a sample. This is what the U.S. government does every 10 years when it counts the U.S. population. If you're looking at a large population, conducting a census isn't always feasible. It's really expensive and it's really difficult. But if you're looking at a smaller population, it might make sense to conduct a census rather than a sample. For example, let's say you want to study women serving in the U.S. Senate. In this case, your population would be women in the U.S. Senate, the number of which is only 17. Now, there are two kinds of sampling: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. In probability sampling, everything in that population has an equal chance of being selected into the sample. This is also called random sampling because people are randomly selected to be in the sample. And it's the best type of sampling we can do because it gives us the most representative sample. In the category of random sampling, there are different types of sampling techniques. In simple random sampling, you just flip a coin. If it's heads, that person or whatever we're studying is included in the study. If it's tails, they're not. In systematic random sampling, you take every nth item on your list or your sampling frame. So we might have a list of small businesses in the state of Utah that we want to study. We get a list or a sampling frame of all those small businesses, and we take every 10th small business to send a survey to. In cluster sampling, we have multiple stages in our sampling procedure. So for example, we might want to study teachers in school districts throughout Cache Valley. So first, we'd randomly select schools from a list of all public schools in Cache Valley. Then we might randomly select 20 teachers from each of those schools. Finally, in stratified random sampling, we want to stratify our sample by some important variable to make sure it's diverse. So for example, maybe we want to study an ethnically diverse church congregation. We know that 25% of the members of this church are Latino and 75% are non-Latino. So using a list of church members, we might randomly select 10 Latinos to be in our sample and 30 non-Latinos to be in our sample, such that our sample is also 25% Latino, 75% non-Latino. Now let's say that you don't have a sampling frame or a list of everything in that population, so you can't randomly select your sample. Or let's say that you're just doing an exploratory study, so generalizability isn't all that important. In these cases, you can use what we call non-probability sampling, which is not random. In snowball sampling, you speak to anyone in that population. Then after you're done interviewing them, you ask them, can you tell me others in this population? And your sample snowballs as you collect contacts and referrals. In availability sampling, you sample whoever's available. So let's say you interview participants of a church group that you're a member of. In this case, you have access to the group and its members are available to you. In quota sampling, you choose members of a sample until you reach a certain quota. So let's say you know that 20% of the workers in a work site are foreign-born and 80% are native-born. So you talk to 20 foreign-born workers and 80 native-born workers. And finally, in purposive sampling, you include anything in that sample that can give you information on what you're interested in. You might study anyone who's knowledgeable about human trafficking in a particular city. You're targeting these people on purpose because they know something that you want to learn about. Now, in addition to measurement validity and generalizability, we want to achieve causal validity in our research. Causal validity is also known as internal validity. In explanatory research, we want to pinpoint a cause. What's causing the change in our dependent variable? To establish causal validity, we have to do three things. First, we have to establish that there's an association between our variables, or a relationship. Second, we need to establish time order. We have to establish that a change in the independent variable occurs first or before the change in the dependent variable. And then third, we have to establish what we call non-spuriousness. By this we mean that we have to make sure that it's not a third variable that's causing both the change in the independent variable and the change in the dependent variable. Now, in your assignment for this unit, you're going to review a published piece of research. In particular, you're going to examine measurement, sampling, and causal claims of the article. What is their concept? Have they defined it clearly? Do they have a good way of measuring it? What's their target population? How did they draw their sample? Does the sample represent the larger population? Are they claiming a causal connection between two variables? If they are, have they established association, time order, and non-spuriousness? These are the questions that you should be asking yourself every time you read a piece of social science research. The good news is that the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So, good luck on your first shot at this, and I look forward to reading your papers. Thanks.